Good evening, everyone. I hope you are well. Just adjust the camera. I don't know why it keeps moving. So, from super majority to a super loss, super collapse. Is that possible? Is that going to happen? Well, we need to look at exactly what this so-called landslide really is, because things are not as they seem. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have actually looked into the voting history, the number of votes collected, and the difference between this election and the previous ones. But without diving in too deep, just broadly looking at the overall figures, we can get a very good idea of exactly where we stand. Now, in this election, this was not about a Labour victory. Far from it. It was completely a Conservative loss, a collapse of the Conservative voter base, and punishment for failing to deliver on Brexit, punishment for failing to control immigration, punishment for being so arrogant and dismissive of the electorate, of their core voters, that they actually thought that they could get away with doing anything that they wanted, and they were arrogant enough to believe that they were entitled to the votes that they receive, and that the voters would ultimately go for them again. But that didn't happen. Even when they wheeled out Boris Johnson, and I must admit he did look like he had been dragged backwards through a hedge. I mean, there's a there's a line that this dishevelled buffoon sort of image uh, becomes too much, and he really looked like he made absolutely no effort whatsoever. His hair, as I said, he just looked like he was dragged backwards through a hedge, and his face was so red it looks like he's spent the last few months in Bordeaux, just downing as much wine as he possibly could. But his charm has gone with the people. It no longer works. He had absolutely no effect whatsoever in salvaging the sinking Conservative Party. And who we got here? So the plan is to see how Labour mess up the country, then people will wake up and then vote Reform UK at the next election. Well, we'll have to see what's going to happen. That's a long way off. Although I don't believe that they will last the 5 years. I don't think they'll even last 4 years, possibly less than that. But let's just see. Just by their actions already, we are seeing what sort of administration they are. Now, even though many of us, including myself, believe that the Rwanda plan was little more than a smokescreen. It was pie in the sky. Uh, it was for a country like the United Kingdom to be resorting to threatening to put people on a plane and take them somewhere else, when most of the time the planes wouldn't even get off the ground, is almost amateur politics, knee-jerk politics, and quite embarrassing. But Rishi Sunak ran with it for the last 2 years, and I do believe, as many people do, one of the reasons that he may have called the election when he did was that he knew it wouldn't really work. However, as it was there, Keir Starmer had the perfect opportunity to leave that in place for the moment, whilst allowing Rishi Sunak to take the entire blame for it. But for him to step into office and actually abandon something that he would have everything to gain but nothing to lose shows the way that his mind works. And as you are aware, the boat set off and we've had our first two today. I didn't get any. I didn't get any images of the actual dinghies themselves. I only saw them on the boats that brought them in. So I don't know if they've upgraded the size of their dinghies, but I expect that they probably will, knowing what they know now. On top of this, appointing the scientific advisor Valance was a very, very bad move. This is a discredited man who tried to terrify the country with chart after chart, fighting to have us all locked down uh, for longer. And every one of his projections was wrong. He's unelected and he's brought him in. Granted, the precedent was set by Sunak by bringing Dave Cameron in, who wasn't an elected member of parliament as foreign secretary. And that really shouldn't happen, because anybody who is part of the government, representing the government, should really be accountable to parliament. And now we have this person who I really, really don't know why he would bring him in and give him a position in government. At the same time, he has appointed David Lammy as Foreign Secretary. This is the guy who is on the record calling Donald Trump some of the most horrible names you could believe, along with other people. And it's already clear that should Trump be successful later in the year, Trump will invariably refuse to deal with David Lammy. So I don't know how that will work. What will actually put Keir Starmer on the spot is if Donald Trump insists on dealing with Nigel Farage, but we'll see. So anyway, just going to the comments. What do we got here? So yes, okay, I've responded to that one. And more people are going to be coming here and could be able to vote. Labour are going to allow all the far left 60-year-olds to vote. We are going to be outvoted. Well, far left, have you been watching what's happened in France? Now, this is sort of Macron's plan backfiring in absolute in absolute international humiliation to him, because he spat his dummy out after the European elections and called a snap elections to try and assert his manhood. Vive la France. And it looked like Marine Le Pen was going to win. So he spent a week running around like a headless chicken, because the French have a complicated electoral system and they go to the polls twice. So in between the last time and yesterday, he was out and about conspiring with anybody who would give him the time of day, trying to find a way to keep Marine Le Pen out. In the end, he struck a deal with the most toxic, hard left group you could possibly imagine. And now they are the largest party. They have kept Marine Le Pen out for now. But what's happened is that now Macron has unleashed the beast of the left. And this guy, who now seems to be the one who's holding the balance of power, who knows how it will end up, because they're going to have to negotiate a government. His spend, open borders, destroy France. So this won't last long either. It will be Europe. The backlash against this left agenda and immigration will come from Europe. It will be Europe first before the UK. But the longer they leave it, it is literally like an archer drawing a bow. And the longer they leave it, the further the pendulum swings to the left, the tighter the draw on the bow. And when it unleashes, it will be the backlash will be all the more hostile and dangerous. And this is not what we want to see. We just really want to see a peaceful continent, UK, and our borders patrolled and respected, and people given the opportunity to buy a house and live their lives. But unfortunately, we will see more immigration now, and more immigration in France, means more immigration crossing the border. Keir Starmer's and Lammy are so desperate to kowtow to the EU that I have no doubt that they will also agree to quotas, which means even more. And if any of you think that these 1.5 million homes that are allegedly going to be built on yet more of our farmland are going to be for people who are already here, then I suggest you think again. It may well be for some of the people who are here, but that's people who have arrived here, not people who were born here. I can see that the vast majority of these homes will be given to those who Labour sympathise with, and we know who they may be. Why they are intent on destroying more of our green belt and building more houses on our priceless and diminishing farmlands, I'll never know. There is the capacity for 2 million homes in the UK on brownfield sites. There's planning for 1.1 million homes over the last 10 years that haven't been built on. There are over 670,000 empty homes in England alone. There is no need to lose more farmland, and that's just to housing. That's before the treacherous Ed Miliband, who suffers from a severe case of small man syndrome, begins to assert his manhood by installing wind turbines in the middle of a field near you. These things are horrid. Everyone actually sits on a bed of around 800 cubic meters of concrete. That land is destroyed forever, and they want to litter the entire country with it. In fact, there has been a recording released. Obviously, they were unaware that they were being recorded at the time, where they actually admit that this nonsense about Great British Energy will cost billions and won't guarantee a sustainable and continued supply of energy because the wind doesn't always blow. We've got them all around Northamptonshire, and actually there isn't a great deal of wind around Northamptonshire. It's one of the lowest in the country. And most of the time they're sat there doing nothing. Northampton North, did you really think Labour will call an election for 5 years? How would they be forced to do an election? I believe that they'll collapse, and I believe that there will be protests, there will be civil unrest. I do feel that they'll be lucky to last 3 years, if not less. Keep in mind, we haven't heard from the unions yet. They have been conspicuous by their absence. Have you not noticed that they have been almost silent for months, apart from one union, I forget which one it is, that came out a few weeks ago and said that they do not back Labour. They will appear to collect. Then there is the division between the left and the right. Keir Starmer's large number of seats could be his downfall, because within those seats there are many people who are to the extreme left of the party, and the party is divided, broken into what they call Corbynistas and Blairites, and many people who are much more familiar with the workings of the Labour Party than I am predict a civil war within the Labour Party, and it may very well fall apart from the inside. But as they make a complete mess of everything, then the people will revolt. As I said, and I'll show you in figures in a presentation in a little while, many of the people who voted Labour were voting because they were angry with the Tories. And here's the irony: most of the anger with the Tories was about immigration and Brexit. So I don't understand the logic. I can understand the anger, but I don't understand the logic of anybody going to Labour if those two things are issues that they are angry with, because Labour certainly will not address them. They will stop illegal immigration because they'll just come over legally. They'll claim a victory in reducing illegal immigration, and meanwhile they will go cap in hand to Europe with their begging bowls, please can we be friends again, okay, and Europe will just say, well, you have to take a quota of the refugees that arrive in the southern European countries, even though they themselves now won't take them. Italy, France, Germany have been literally pulling up the drawbridge, and Schengen has just gone to pot over the last few months, and they're actually breaking their own rules. So how that will go in the future, I'll never know. But with what's happening in France, that is really, really serious, because it's going to end very, very badly. With Patrick Vallance, now Minister of Science, who was quoted last month saying another pandemic is inevitable. Will there be another lockdown before Christmas? Well, who knows? I'm almost certain that Keir Starmer is going to sign that agreement. I forgot what's called with the WHO. I should write these things down beforehand, because when I'm live and I'm thinking what to say, I forget these things. So I do apologise. And that actually gives the WHO the right to declare a pandemic. They've laid the seeds for it already with bird flu, saying that it has now become fatal. Somebody died a few weeks ago. It also gives them the right to seize a percentage of our medical supplies or vaccines, up to 20%, I believe, although I'm sure there are many people that wouldn't be too unhappy about a large percentage of our vaccines being taken and given to people in another country instead of being forced on us. But that's another matter, and I'll drop that there, otherwise they'll take this video down, because every time I go off on anything sensitive, my videos just get taken down. I think I've had about 12 taken down in the last few months, and I've never actually said anything bad, just discussed things. But there you go. And this will only get worse through our beloved Labour's term in power. Trump and Lammy would be funny to see, wouldn't it just? Especially when people start posting the quotes of Lammy when he called him a Nazi, whatever he called him, not that long ago. How will that work? But even more embarrassing will be if he doesn't agree to a meeting with our foreign secretary. Don't like calling him our foreign secretary, but there you go. That's who he is for the time being. And he will more than likely be happy to meet with Farage, either if not over here. I'm sure that Farage will get an invite to go over to the States. And if Keir Starmer does want to negotiate anything, how's that going to work? Will he have to invite Nigel to number 10? Now that would be interesting. You see, when Farage said that Trump may very well get back into power, people like Keir Starmer laughed, and come November, in Farage's famous fashion, you were laughing then, but you're not laughing now. And if Sleepy Joe continues the way that he is, I mean, I can't believe that he's actually put his foot down. Is he capable of putting his foot down? And he said that he wants the talk of him standing down to end, because he intends to stand and fight the next election. I don't know how he's going to do that. He can't even stay awake. Nigel has this racist stigma that people believe the mainstream media. I'm afraid so. That's just how it is. There's been so much thrown at anybody connected with anybody connected with Brexit, anybody connected with anything that contradicts the narrative, because they lose the argument. They know that they can lose the argument. They know that they can't win the argument if they are arguing on a level playing field with logic. That is why Question Time have a rigged audience. That is why the mainstream media, BBC, Channel 4, Sky News, all behave and repeat the same narrative. Uh, Everything is staged, managed for their benefit, and everything is loaded in their favour, plus the fact that they spout out this bile in mainstream media. And unfortunately, there are a large number of the population who believe it, and then all those who disagree, believe it or not, will repeat it because it gives them ammunition, because they are not capable of arguing with hard logic, because uh, logic is irrefutable. It's much easier to just resort to name calling and accusations and horrible allegations. And look what happened through the election campaign. So many different stories, so many different people attacked, and even candidates being set up. Um, but in the order of things, we're talking a handful, if that, in a newly formed party that got together in a matter of months. And I really don't know why they are making so much fuss about it, because Labour and Conservatives have been around for decades and centuries even. And, they have dozens of perverts and corrupt people. It's only in the last few months we have seen MPs stand down because they have behaved indecently in Parliament. There was one not too far from here. So the audacity for them to criticize a party for somebody who's a bit rough and ready and may not have even been a genuine candidate anyway, because there is strong evidence that some of the so-called rogue candidates were just planted there just so that they would discredit the party. Think about it. It costs you nothing to stand as a candidate. The only thing that you need to do is when you submit your nominations, you have to pay your deposit of £500. And considering how well Reform was doing, even a fake candidate would more than likely receive 5% of the vote and get their £500 back. And at the end of the day, if they were planting them there, would they be concerned about the £500? There was one candidate who appeared at the last minute, just before nominations closed. She pleaded to join and stand for the party. She did, never met anybody, never had time to meet anybody because the election was called or had already been called. And then, literally a few days before the election, she stood down and made all sorts of allegations, and then said publicly that she throws her support behind the Conservative candidate. Is that a coincidence, I wonder? Who knows? So what have we got now? Even though Reform had some infiltrators saying racist stuff. Oh, sorry, this is just what I was saying. Great minds think alike, Robin. Are you really Robin Hood? But anyway, Reform had some legit people that said some anti-gay stuff. Reform needs to vet all people. Absolutely, completely agreed. And they will do that ruthlessly now. Yes, they did intend to field as many candidates as possible because they promised that they would. And sometimes you do have to put your faith in people. But ultimately, once again, candidates and members of parliament for the main parties think what they have said. Lammy actually called Donald Trump a Nazi. Now, imagine if it were a minority party that had done that, especially one that was to the right of the centre. What would have happened then, or anything similar to that? That's just one example of many. I actually have a list of disgraced Labour and Conservative MPs and councillors, and you will be shocked how many there are and what they have been up to. And they have the nerve to pick on, it is a handful of people out of well over 600 that's negligible. It really is negligible. Um, were it not for the bias, the spite, and the malicious, premeditated uh, bile from mainstream media, it wouldn't have even mattered, to be perfectly honest. Somebody says something wrong, okay, this is not acceptable policy, same as in a workplace. You take people on if they misbehave, whatever the case is, depending on the gravity of it, perhaps they get a verbal warning or a written warning, and for some behavior, it is instant dismissal. The same thing. Nobody can be held responsible for what an individual says or does, even if they are part of the party. Now, had they been part of the party longer, like many of the Labour and Conservative MPs, then the party, in those instances, I suppose, could take more of the blame because it could be argued that they know them. And there are many instances where they have covered up this type of behaviour. How many years was the Liberal Party covering for Cyril Smith, who was behaving indecently in manners I don't want to go into, literally within minutes of the Houses of Parliament? Are you telling me nobody knew? People knew, people covered it up, just in the same way as the BBC has covered up a world of perversions over the last few decades, and nobody and nothing will convince me that somebody didn't know and kept it quiet. If I'm making you laugh, then actually that's good, because um, despite everything that we face, I think that we need to approach it with a little bit of tongue in cheek, with a little bit of humor, and a little bit of positive attitude, because otherwise we just make life untenable. So they are in power. They've got to put their money where their mouth is. There's a lot going on. So let's just get the popcorn out, because there's going to be a lot that's going to happen. Imagine, if you would, the most stressful job in the world, or the most stressful situation. Now, what would that be? For me, it would be to be in a position where the whole country, indeed, the whole world, has its eyes on me, and I am expected to deliver. And as my right hand, or in my right hand, my wing man, woman, wing person, what's the correct word to say, is a foul mouthed woman who is on the record using the most obscene language to describe her colleagues in Parliament, for which she had to apologise for. A person who actually is incapable of doing simple mathematics, like one house plus another house equals two houses, not one house. Imagine how stressful it is for him knowing that he has, as his deputy leader, a trigger happy, incapable, and incompetent person who will invariably mess things up. Let's not forget that in a cowtail meeting with a bunch of men who support a collection of terrorists, she just took it upon herself to make up foreign policy on the spot. She basically, without even giving any thought for the implications internationally, domestically, in terms of peace and conflict, she opened her mouth and said, if you vote for us, we will recognize Palestine. She's going to be held to that. It hasn't come up yet, but trust me, it will. Firstly, she can't find Palestine on a map. And secondly, opening her gob has sent a message that the Labour government will reward terrorism and will reward the behaviour that we saw, the horrendous behaviour we saw on the 7th of October last year. Now, that implies that borders can be changed by hostility or by aggression. And that is the fundamental rule of international law, that you cannot occupy land that you own, and that borders cannot be changed through aggression. And she has just basically changed that in a meeting to just win over a few supporters, and who weren't going to vote for her anyway, because I'm sure they had their own person who they were going to vote for. But that sets a precedent. So what effect will that have on the Donbass, on Crimea, on Transnistria, on Kashmir, on many other places around the world with borders that are disputed? She's sent a message that if you are hostile enough and you kick up enough fuss and you lie enough, that the British will actually support your cause. That's what she said. She's not only laid the foundations for conflicts to endure even further than they need to, but she may very well, and hopefully not, have laid the foundations for future conflicts where countries who may not be the most well behaved will think, well, we'll try on with the border with this country. Conflict. She has laid the foundations for more conflict with her irresponsible behaviour. There is a reason that we have a Foreign Office. There is a reason that all ministers traditionally refer or are guided by the Foreign Office before they make any comment about anything to do with foreign policy, because the Foreign Office is guided by the best of the best in the civil service who know what they're doing, and their job is to plan the future of our country over the next few decades. A minister is concerned about lasting till the end of the week without getting sacked. And yes, you have heard that somewhere before. If you know where you've heard it, before I tell you, put your answers in a comment and let's see if you have. MSM does not like to mention anything bad about their side. No, absolutely. Of course they don't. Majority of the people think I work with voted Labour and hate Nigel. Oh, okay. All right. It is difficult, and this is what is sad, that many people now, because the minority and the minority and extreme left and woke have managed to get themselves into positions of power in the media, in government, in banking. Look how Nigel was treated by Dame Alison Rose. And that was a personal vendetta because she was a Remainer. Imagine how toxic she really must be. Many people are scared to speak up because they feel that they might lose their job. They might have their bank account closed down, and there is no debating with people from the left. I have always said the left do not debate. The left only hate. You only need to look through the comments and the behaviour of the left to see how vile they can be and how hostile they can be, and they will go to any lengths to smear anyone. They don't discuss anything. They're not capable of it. So anyway, moving on from this for the moment, let me just go through the actual topic, which is about the current administration, and the topic of the video, which is from super majority to super collapse. So we did it, but what exactly did they do? Okay, right. Well, let's just put it into perspective. Starmer got 9.7 million votes, landslide. But in 2019, Jeremy Corbyn got 10,269,000, and that was an atrocious result. And in 2017, Jeremy Corbyn got nearly 13 million votes. It's not a landslide. This was not a Labour victory. This was a Conservative catastrophe. So most of, or rather a lot of the Labour support or any increase came from the collapsing SNP party. And I have a feeling that the SNP party, how it fell apart approaching the election, could very well be indicative of what will happen to the Labour Party as it approaches the next election. The SNP basically drowned in its own venom. But the fleeing SNP voters, many of which, or a large portion, moved to the Labour Party. If you look at the figures in the last 5 years, there's a 1% rise in England, a large rise of 17% in Scotland. Wales was down 4%. However, even so, he still never managed to reach Tony Blair's stomping to 97 majority, and just slightly shy of the 2001 result. Now, how would proportional representation had changed? What effect would it have had on this election? So if you take a look, the share, this is the share of the votes, 34, it's actually less than 34, it's 33 point something, 24, 12 for the Lib Dems. The Reform Party got 14% and the Greens got 7%. But even so, look how the ratio of votes to seats actually worked out. In this election, it was the highest ratio of seats to vote share. In other words, 1.8 seats to 1.8 to 1.8 to 1 ratio this year, whereas the average has over the last 30-40 years has been around 1.4 1.5, and just in 2001 2005 the ratio went to 1.5. Other times it's been as low as just over 1.2. So that actually means that they have many more seats than they did receive in votes, which means that the people are unrepresented. Keep in mind, they got just under 34% of the vote, meaning that 66% of people who voted did not want Labour, and the figure of those who were eligible to vote interprets into 80%, it is estimated, did not want the Labour Party. So if you look at the vote to seat ratio, again, as I said, in 2001 and 2005, under Tony Blair, it was around 1.5, and this time it has actually exceeded 1.8, which is absolutely horrendous. This is the least representative government of the voters in history. Looking at the share of their votes, as you can see, both Labour and Conservatives have been declining over the last year. Labour did have a little bit of a surge towards the end, but not much. If you remember the polls a few months ago, they were polling Labour as much as 48%. But I do think that this was strategic questioning to get high polls for the Labour Party to create a euphoria and encourage more people to vote for them. There is argument that there should be no official polls allowed or to be released by any mainstream media during the course of an election, because I do believe, and I'm not the only one, that the polls can influence people. People should vote on the policy, not vote by who they are thinking is going to win. And this also raises the argument that there are those who are Labour supporters who would argue the reason that the Labour vote share was lower was that there were many Labour voters who stayed at home in the belief that, well, Labour's going to win anyway, it doesn't matter if I vote or not. I'm not sure. And as you can see, the Conservatives, they nosedived, and they're from where they were, they literally they have been wiped out effectively. And yet, look, if you look at Reform, it wasn't just a late surge, it was huge. And from polling less than 5% a year ago, they got to 14%, even with the entire mainstream media gunning for them and gunning for individual candidates. And trust me, I know what that feels like. Along with this, because of the amount of people who were anti-Tory, there was a lot of tactical voting, which benefited the Lib Dems because there were many seats where traditional Labour voters decided to vote Lib Dem according to research to get the Lib Dem candidate in rather than risk the Conservative candidate winning. This also worked the other way around, where there were areas where Lib Dem voters voted for the Conservative candidate rather than risk splitting the vote and allowing the Conservative in. Ultimately, it wasn't too big a deal because the Lib Dems and the Labour Party currently are fairly closely aligned, but what they did have in common is they wanted to keep the Conservatives out. So this is how it ended up with the election share after all of this tactical voting and mainstream media bile and all of the rest that you know about. And tactical voting actually meant that this was the vote share on the left, and on the right is the actual seat share, which, as you can see, is not representative at all. This is how it actually worked out in seating. And as you can see, Reform, who got 14% of the vote, actually get less than 1% of the seats. And Labour, on the other hand, who only got less than 34% of the vote, get the lion's share of the seats in Parliament. So the people are not represented at all. But now the pressure is on because Keir Starmer now knows that he has to perform, because even though he has a large majority, much of that majority is not, it does not have a large majority in the individual seats. Now, will that influence what he does? Because if he starts to offend the wrong people, as the by-elections begin to come in for whatever reason, their candidates will be booted out. And I don't believe that they are in any way guaranteed a second term. Far from it. I don't think that they will get a second term. I don't even see them. I don't even believe that they will see out the first term, because the political spectrum is to the right, and Reform and Conservatives combined got well over 1 million votes more than Conservatives, than the Labour Party, even taking into account the collapse of the Conservative vote. But given a taste of what these clowns will do, then I can see the political landscape changing very, very quickly. And ultimately, this is where we have ended up. And for the time being, we have to deal with it. But if you look at the seats, this is 17, 19, and 24, you will see that in 2024, there is a massive portion of seats that have a majority of less than 5,000. The vast majority is less than 10,000, and then it really tails off quickly those who have a majority of more than 10,000. These majorities, and I was watching them as they were coming in on election night, there are so many Labour seats with wafer thin majorities that will invariably be lost. It is not as it seems. And I believe that Keir Starmer is intelligent enough to know it, but not to say it. Angela Rayner is not intelligent enough to know it unless she's told it, but I don't think she's smart enough to understand the consequences of it. So why are Britons voting Labour, or why did they vote Labour? This was a poll before the election. 48% to get rid of the Tories. 48%. Not because they wanted Labour, only 5% said because they agree with Labour's policies. That is not a very good mandate at all. And it's not a very good starting point. So he's in 2024. I don't expect Labour to win in 2029 whatsoever. I don't think that they'll do it. And I don't even think that they will get there, to be perfectly honest. So let's go back to our questions. What have we got here? What's this one here? With a left-wing government in the UK and a far-left coalition in France, will Starmer get us back in the EU by the back door by establishing closer relationships? I think they're working on that already. In fact, I'm actually surprised that they haven't drafted in Femi as the Minister for EU Relations. I hope that we can see the back of him now. To be perfectly honest, it would be nice for him to be pestering Labour, but he won't be because has been funded by people on the left. So he probably won't be kicking up a fuss now, unless it's anything to do with the Conservatives. As you may be aware, if you've seen him recently, he's now rebranded himself and he now calls himself the Black Journalist. He turned up at the Reform rally at the NEC last Sunday and he wasn't allowed in, and he made a big fuss about not being allowed in and being removed from the building and so on and so forth. But really, who on earth would allow him to enter into any event if they could keep him out? He really is just a hired mouthpiece, and not a very good one at that. And someone said 80% of the country did not vote for Labour. Great minds think alike. I think we need to go out for a beer, Robin. I said that earlier on. Yes, 66% of those who voted did not vote for Labour. 80% of those registered to vote did not want Labour. So Labour are in on a mandate of 34% of those who voted, or 20% of those who are eligible to vote. Okay, you could argue those who could vote and didn't, they should literally be banging their head against the wall now, because they should have voted. It's especially in the climate that we're in at the moment. But there we go. The vast majority of the country does not want this Prime Minister or this cabinet. I'm sure not many people want Ed Miliband as Minister for Net Zero. He is a fanatic about net zero and ULEZ and setting aside more of our farmland for these ugly wind turbines. He is the disciple of the globalists in a very big way, and I'm sure he wants to get his own back because we voted the wrong way when he stood for when he was leader of the Labour Party. Was that the 2015 election, was it? Yes. So who on earth would want him as to have any power whatsoever? All of these people who should not be in power, who are making decisions out of malice, making decisions out of contempt for the people, contempt for Conservative voters, they will be so destructive, it's untrue. And unfortunately, we have no choice but to sit back and watch them destroy our country. Think about the landscape. I mean, today, Rachel Reeves is boasting about removing or lifting, easing off planning rules to build on greenbelt, to build on farmland, when there is capacity for 2 million homes on brownfield sites. They they don't need to destroy any more farmland. We need it. We do not produce enough food as there is. We have the space on brownfield sites, land already that has planning and empty homes to satisfy the current demand, provided we put a stop to the numbers making it into this country. But as I said, these 1.5 million homes that they plan to build, if they build, I asked you the question, who will they be for? So we only need to look back to what previous Labour governments have done to this country. It is Labour governments that gave us some of the ugliest tower blocks in history, in the world outside of the Soviet Union, I would say. Here in Northampton, it is previous Labour governments that pulled down some of our most beautiful buildings, which, in my opinion, I am of the opinion they had absolutely no right to do. You do not pull down beautiful Victorian buildings and older because they are priceless and they cannot be replaced. And everything that they replaced these buildings with was the ugliest architecture you could possibly imagine. And even if it is done for their friends to profit, the building continues to remain as a blight on the landscape long after the profit has gone and been forgotten. It is the greatest crime against a nation to destroy its heritage, but these people have no respect for our heritage. In fact, they hold it in contempt. And we can see that by their actions and their contempt for independent schools, because they want everybody in their comprehensive schools because they don't believe in levelling up, they believe in levelling down, apart from their own champagne socialist circles. And I find it shocking that anybody with an ounce of intelligence would not see through that and would not do their utmost, do everything that they can to stop these people from ever getting their hand on the tiller. And unfortunately, thanks to the behaviour of the Conservatives, which goes back to Boris Johnson once again, who let down this country more than anybody I can think of in recent history. He had the keys to a prosperous future for this country, and he sold us out. And now we have to endure these people. And that buffoon has the audacity to pipe up 1 or 2 days before the election to give us advice about who to vote for. It's shocking. On his head be what we are about to witness and suffer over the next few years. Someone said. So, on that note, I think that will do on for this video. If you have any questions, any input, suggestions about topics, by all means, get in touch. There will be new topics every day as this bunch of clowns come up with more harebrained schemes to damage our country. But there we go. All we can do is to keep fighting, keep aware, stay connected, and ensure that we hold them accountable and that we stay connected, because the race is on now to see which is going to be the first seat, Labour seat, to fall. Oh, and on that note, that reminds me that there is a DUP MP for the DUP who was actually closely aligned with Reform previously, who is now in negotiations to move over to Reform. He is the candidate in Northern Ireland who took Ian Paisley's seat from him. I've forgotten his name. I did have it jotted down, but I don't have it with me. So it will be interesting to see who's going to defect to reform and which Labour candidate gets out the kitchen because they can't cope with the heat. And then we'll see. One more here. What have we got? Thanks for the stream and see you again. Thank you very much. An absolute pleasure. Please feel free to join me again. And if any questions you have, always feel free to post them to me. And that's why I'm here. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye bye for now. And I'll see you soon. And I will leave you with this.